We went to the state of Idaho. I have a big affinity for the Department of Natural Resources, or Fish and Game as they call it there, in Idaho. It's very well managed. We work with a biologist there. His name is Brett High. Wonderful guy. He's the one taking us out ice fishing here. And he was talking to me about the South Fork of the Snake River. Now, I don't know if any of you have ever heard of this, but if you fly fish in here, or you know anyone that fly fishes, you probably heard of this river. It has more rainbow trout in it per mile of river than basically any stream in the entire world, which gets me fired up because I like that fatty, good, peach-colored meat. It's the best there is. But here's the deal. During World War II, all of our veterans came home from the war, and times were tough. So one of the things that they turned to was hunting and fishing to feed their families, especially fishing in that area because it was so good. And they were catching cutthroat trout after cutthroat trout after cutthroat trout after cutthroat trout of the Yellowstone variety, if you know there's a few different ones. And they would catch them and eat all they got. So as the cutthroat trout were going away, the Fish and Game at the time had, I don't remember the exact number, I want to say it was in the hundreds of thousands of fry of rainbow trout at the time. And they said, we have to put a stop to this because they're going to eat us out of house and home. That's what my mom told me when I turned about 17 and I didn't stop eating. I didn't get any taller though. Even so, they were getting eaten out of house and home, so the Department of Natural Resources at the time said, okay, we're going to release these rainbow trout into the river. We think they'll do good, and we think they can actually save the cutthroat trout. So they release all the rainbow trout into the river, and the rainbow trout take off. They're hardy, tough fish, unless you have them out of the water, but hardy, tough fish that like to outcompete other fish. In addition to that, rainbow trout are able to interbreed with the cutthroat. But for the time, it did save the cutthroat trout. Fishermen started keeping the rainbow trout, letting the cutthroat trout go, and everything was hunky-dory. The year 2020, 2021, 2022, 2023 comes along, and now we don't have as many people out there fishing. We have tons of catch and release fishermen that aren't keeping fish. We have a lack of interest from my generation in hunting and fishing. And because of that, the rainbow trout numbers are escalating and cutthroat trout numbers are going down. Mainly because the cutthroat trout and the rainbow trout are able to interbreed. So actual pure cutthroat trout are hard to find. Now, another reason I respect the Idaho Fish and Game so much is because they're very dedicated to their surveys to the people that buy hunting and fishing licenses, and they say, what can we do to make you happy with our conservation efforts? And the number one thing over everything else in the entire state, every single issue, they said, we want our native cutthroat trout, the ones that were here when God put them there, we want them to stick around. We don't want the other fish to outcompete them and put them away. So we went down there and we got in this big rig. It was an electro fishing boat. And you get on the front and they would shock the water and we would scoop up all the rainbow trout and we would measure and look at the cutthroat trout and let them go. We'd pick up the rainbow trout, we put it in this giant cooler. When I say giant, I mean it was about the size of me to the end of the stage there, filled with water, and we would put the fish in there. We caught between 800 or 900 in just a couple of hours. And we transported them to another river where they wouldn't negatively impact the cutthroat trout, but would still give people an opportunity to fish for them. So that's an idea of excellent conservation use. That's an excellent example of us buying a fishing license and having the funds used to protect native cutthroat trout. Now the science says you actually have to knock down the population 30% in order to start the downward spiral. If you can get 30% of the rainbow trout out, it's like a snowball going down a hill. They'll continue to lower, 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 and then what will happen is in 5 to 10 years' time, you'll have the same volume of fish in the river, but they'll be cutthroat as opposed to the rainbow. So the rainbow are getting moved, still creating fishing opportunities for people to catch and keep, and the cutthroat trout are on the rise back.